Hey, what is up everyone? Welcome back to another custom GUNPLA video, and today I'm taking the figurized standard Fumina and transforming her into this devil girl version. Basically, this is just based on a joke I used to make about the older Fumina kits, that's these ones, saying that they were possessed by Satan and just taking that whole idea and making it into somewhat of a good customed kit. This was done in a bit of a rush because it was for Halloween, so there's a couple of things I would have liked to have corrected on it, but still it turned out a lot better than I expected it would, so that's enough rambling. Let's get right into how it was done. So first up was the prep. That of course was separating everything because this was built already, sanding it down so that paint will stick because I've had those issues before. I cleaned up all the nubs, which there isn't much of on this kit. This is a really nice kit. For me, the only real major down point with this kit is the seams in the legs. There is no movement here, there is no real reason for these seams unless they're going to do something with this part of the body sometime with a future release. So I sealed those up the way I did before. That is with a whole lot of plastic cement, sticking them together. Make sure that it flows out like this so you've got something to work with. Once that's dry, sand it away. I still had a little bit of a line in there, so I got some Mr. Surfacer 1000, sprayed that on there, let that dry, sanded it all off until I had a nice smooth surface. I will mention though that if you're working with a light color over this, you don't want to use gray, you'd probably want to use white or something like that. I was going to prime this afterwards, so it didn't really matter that there was a little bit of a line. So before I was going to paint this, there was one modification that I really wanted to do, and that was to give her some horns. To give her that real devil look. How I did this was I bored a couple of holes using a small hand drill into the front part of her hair. I then bored holes of the exact same size into some horns. Now these horns I got from a box of Citadel skulls, that's this box right here. I was lucky I had this just knocking around because these were the perfect size. I will also mention that I did give her some wings as well, which I got from this box of Daughters of Cain miniatures from Warhammer. So once I had bored those holes into the hair and into the horns, I did trial fit these with some toothpicks, but I felt they wouldn't really hold up over time. So I took a Gundam runner, whittled it down to just the right size that the horns would just squeeze on and hold tight. And this is so I could spray them both different colors separately instead of making it permanent at this point. Because masking is not my strong suit. So once all the sanding and the modifications were done, it was time to get this kit painted. So as for all the skin, I used one of the worst paints I've ever had the horror to work with, and that is Tamiya's fluorescent red spray. This gets everywhere. Everywhere. If you're using this, be careful. On your clothes, on the ground, everywhere. This weird powder just sprays all over the place. It's such an odd, messy paint. I also mentioned that I did undercoat that with Citadel's Wraithbone, which is quite the good undercoat, I might add. And speaking of good primers and good undercoats, the black I did on this was all done with Citadel's Chaos Black. I love this paint. It's always been great, it still is great, and all the black was done with this. Just to change up the surface with some matte and gloss to give it a little bit of extra dimension, I did use some Mr. Super Clear in both gloss and flat. As for decals, as she isn't a robot, I decided to keep it quite simple. So I just took one skull from a Warhammer 40,000 vehicle transfer sheet, and that was this skull right here, and used that on the front of her shirt. As usual, I did use both Mark Softer and Mark Setter to make sure that this fit perfectly, and I will mention that I did not know before, but Citadel water slide decals are just as good as what we usually see from Bandai, which is awesome. Once she was all painted up and I gave it time to dry, it took a long time because it was primer, then paint, then top coat, so it did take quite an amount of time. And in that time, it turned out I threw out the instruction manual, so I kind of had to just figure it out all over again how to put her back together. It still worked out pretty fine though. It also seems to be a very common occurrence when I'm customizing these kits that I think they're absolutely ruined, absolutely horrible, and rubbish before I actually assemble them, and then when I assemble them, they actually look pretty good. So if you're ever customizing kits, feel like it's really not working out, I say hold out until you actually put it together. It can totally change your mind. But anyway, there we go. This is what the finished Devil Girl version of Fumina looks like, already just in time for Halloween. So once again, as has happened all the time with all of these customs, is A lot of things went wrong. More things went wrong than went right, but hey, that means I learned a lot of new things. But before I do get onto all of the things that did go wrong, in the end this turned out pretty cool. There's a couple of things I did not film or mention about this. The silver that I used on this is that awesome Tamiya metallic silver that I've mentioned before. I'll pop that on the screen so you can see which one it was. I adore this paint. And just in case I did forget to mention it, I did undercoat all of the skin that I was to use the fluorescent paint on with Citadel's Wraithbone. I did use a lot of different primers underneath the paint, and it just did not work. This paint will not work on gray primer, and it will not work on dark primer. Not a chance. It has to be white. But yeah, this turned out pretty good. I am quite happy with it. And here's all the things that went wrong that, well, could have went a little bit better. Once again, I was struck by the fact that these little cans of paint have next to nothing inside of them. All I did on this kit was do the skin with the red, and it ran out before I could get a nice even coat over everything. This paint requires a lot of buildup. The first layer will look, well, not even red at all. The second layer will look a little redder, etc, etc. And it still looks a little bit patchy, but it somehow gives it a little bit of that skin vibe. Still, I would like to have had it be a little bit more uniform. You might be wondering how I did that hair. It actually looks like I put a lot of effort into it, but I put zero effort at all. This, once again, is another Citadel paint. That's the paint I have mostly more than anything else. And what this is Citadel's Contrast Apothecary White. Now this is a kind of mix of a wash and paint in the one tub that basically does all the work for you. I did not know how this would turn out on a bigger figure than, well, your average Warhammer Mini, but it turned out quite well. It's over Wraithbone once again, which is the primer, and what this does is go into all of the gaps to give it a whiter look with somewhat darker grey shading. I will mention it isn't even everywhere. She's kind of got a good side now, because on this side it could have been a bit better. That's the side with the botchy arm, so yeah, Fumina is only looking good from the right hand side anymore. Next of the things that could have went better but didn't go that bad this time is the wings. I couldn't think of a fancy, smart way to attach them like the horns. I didn't have much time. They're very delicate little wings, so I just glued them to her back. That means up close this does look a little bit on the messy side, but hey, it still looks quite cool. I did think of attaching them into that peg hole in her back with some kind of apparatus, kind of Darkstalker's waist wing style, but it just didn't look right. I wanted them up there. Once again, totally forgot to mention earlier on the video, so I'll mention it right now. This is somewhat based on the figure of knee socks by, I don't know, I'll pop it up on the screen. So yeah, up close they look a little bit rough. From a distance you'd never notice, and from the front you would have no idea. So that's a win in my book. Also, I will mention that this paint does glow under UV light. I don't actually have a black light handy, so I do have some blue lights that give a little bit of an idea of what it would be like, but this is now a fluorescent figure, which is pretty cool. Probably should get a black light. Once again, I will mention that I did use Tamiya Mark Setter and Mark Softer to attach all of the water slide decals, which makes them look painted on. I did cover it over eventually with some matte top coat, and I really have to commend Bandai for including water slides in this kit. It really makes customizing so much better and so much easier. As for the mouth, I felt it looked a little bit flat just with this standard mouth, so I decided to paint some lips onto it. I did this once again using Citadel paint. It was a mix of Abaddon Black with a hefty dose of their medium, which is Lamian Medium. Basically, I made a kind of semi-translucent black wash, which didn't end up as shiny as I hoped it would be, so I added a little bit of Tamiya's clear red over it to give it that little bit of a shine. I did paint some of the accessories, that is the hands and the alternate faces, but I did not customize the jacket that came with this. Basically, when I was deciding whether or not to put wings onto her, well, that kind of made the decision whether or not I could have a removable jacket or not, or should I say hoodie. Because those wings are permanent, I decided to completely axe the hoodie. As for the alternate faces, once again, here's what they look like. So there is the shocked, surprised face, which turned out better than expected. I thought the red of the mouth on the red skin would kind of clash or be invisible, but it doesn't. They're two different shades, so it looks quite good. And the other alternate face then was meant to be this embarrassed one, but now that it's painted with the different color skin and with that little bit of a lip, it looks like a completely different expression. Once again, turned out better than expected. I will also mention that because of the way that I customized the front of the hair, that does mean I'm able to remove and reattach all of the faces in the same way as before, even though there's horns on there, so I will be honest, that was an absolute happy accident. But anyway, that is it for the video. Tell me what you think down there in the comments. Once again, with all of these customized videos, I am just learning to do them. This is my third serious custom yet, so a lot of the things that I've been doing aren't necessarily the right way. So drop down there in the comments, how would you have approached any of the things that I did in this video differently that you think could improve it? I do read all of the comments. I don't always have much time to answer them, but I am taking everything on board, so I will say thank you if you are helping out by dropping some of them. Anyway, the next video that will be coming up is this kit right here, which is the entry grade RX-78-2. This kit is ridiculous. I never expected the entry grade to look this cool, be this cool, and feel this cool. This is the greatest beginner GUNPLA kit ever, so make sure to come back for that one. Anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Once again, I cannot finish this video right here without thanking each and every one of you guys. Whether you just watch my videos, like them, or support the channel on the channel memberships and over on Patreon. Like Craig Jury, Greg Humphrey, Kaiser721, Tyler Sanders, Caleb Engelhardt, Sean T, and the ambassador for Asymmetric Cat.